Hello, this is going to be Chapter 4, Objective 3. Now, I'm actually going to take Objective 3 and break it up into two parts. So we're going to have a 3A and a 3B. This is going to be Video 3A, where we talk about the general characteristics and functions of epithelial tissue. And then, so this is going to be 3A video. And then the 3B video is going to go over glands. So let's go ahead and get started on characteristics and functions of epithelial tissue, video 3A. So when we're talking about epithelial tissue, generally it is sheets of cells that covers an exterior surface of a body or lines the internal open body cavities and passageways, and it also forms certain glands. Again, we're going to talk about glands in video 3B. So what are some general characteristics of epithelial tissue? One of the things is we said that it does line hollow internal structures. So what we're looking at here is a cross-section of a blood vessel. It doesn't matter what kind, it's an artery, but that doesn't matter. You can see this, let me get a different color pen here so you can see maybe a little bit better. See this single layer of cells that's just below that blue line, so you can see that little single layer of cells right there. That is epithelial tissue. So this right here is that hollow organ area where you're going to have blood that's going to flow through. So you can see the blood that's going to move through that blood vessel. And this inside lining, that inside wall, is that epithelial tissue. You can see it's a single layer of cells. It's very, very small. Now, as we move through, I'm going to show you pictures of epithelial tissue. Hopefully this will help you with the lab class where you have to actually identify them for lab. For lecture, I'm not going to give you a picture of epithelial tissue and ask you to name it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to describe what epithelial tissue looks like, and you're going to need to be able to tell me those characteristics and identify those characteristics on the test. I'm just showing you pictures to help you see what's going on. So one of the things that epithelial tissue is known for is it's mostly cells. You're not going to see a lot of other stuff. I'm going to go ahead and change colors here on my pen so you can see. Epithelial tissue is mostly cells. We said that with tissues, you've got the cellular component of tissues and the extracellular component of tissues, the stuff found outside the cells. Well, you can see with epithelial tissue, you don't have a lot of stuff outside the cell. What you're looking at here is a single layer of flat-shaped cells. So maybe you guys remember that as simple squamous from lab class. Just to kind of show you what we're looking at here. This little gray line that I'm pointing to, that little gray line right there, goes all the way around the cell. That is the plasma membrane or cell membrane. Okay, that is made up of a phospholipid bilayer, and that is the barrier to the cell, right? It allows things to enter and exit the cell. What you're seeing, that light gray that you're seeing on the inside of the cell, this would be your cytoplasm or cytosol. We'll just go ahead and call it cytoplasm. So that's the area of the cytoplasm. And then you've got your dark purple spherical area here. That is the nucleus of the cell. You can even see that dark purple dot in the center there, which would be the nucleolus, right, where ribosomes get made. But you can see that when you're looking at epithelial tissue. You can see the nucleus. Now, you're not going to be able to see the other organelles, but you can definitely see the nucleus and the plasma membrane. And you can see one plasma membrane is right up against the plasma membrane of another cell, so there's no extracellular stuff when you're dealing with epithelial tissue for the most part. Okay, here's another picture of some epithelial tissue. Another thing that characteristic of epithelial tissue is it covers body surfaces. You can see right here, this is a single layer of column-shaped cells. You can see those cells are very long and column-shaped with a nice organized nucleus right there in the center. This is going to be simple cuboidal is what that's going to be. So again, like we said, it covers body surfaces. It's going to line the inside of the digestive tract, which is an open, hollow organ system. It's going to line the inside of the respiratory tract, another open, hollow organ system. It's going to line the inside of the heart. We saw that in a previous slide. It's going to be the inside lining of blood vessels and other body cavities. And again, like we said, it's also going to form those glands as well. Another characteristic is that with epithelial tissue, it actually has distinct surfaces. It has a top, a side, and a bottom. For example, not all cells do. If we were to look at a red blood cell, for example, and I was to say, look at the top of the cell, you'd be like, well, it's kind of round shaped. Where's the top going to be? White blood cell the same way. So again, just giving you some examples there. Not all cell types have a top, a side, and a bottom, but epithelial tissue does. The free space, you can see right here, this is a group of cells. These would be a group of stratified squamous, many layers of flat type cells. The apical surface, this would be where the lumen is, and you can see right here you have simple squamous, a single layer of flat cells. This would be the lumen up here, where the material would pass over or through. This again, material, whatever, would pass through here. That's the outside surface, so to speak. Now, you've got the lateral side of the cells, and that's going to be your lateral surface. So these areas right here, that would be your lateral surface, where it's on the side touching another cell. And then you've got the basal surface. The basal surface is where it's going to be connected to underlying tissue types. So this right here would be that basal surface, okay, or basement membrane. And it helps attach that epithelial tissue to this underlying tissue right here, okay, whatever it may be, usually connective tissue of some type. So it's got three basic surfaces to it. This is a busy slide. I'm not going to ask you for everything on the slide, but I just want to make sure that you understand that epithelial tissue is not only just pushed up against other epithelial cells, it's actually physically connected to other cells and structures. So there's some physical connections here. And let me just kind of give you an example. If y'all have ever had a burn of some kind, maybe even a sunburn, you can see that your skin, you can kind of peel the skin off as it's healing. The dead skin will come off as a whole sheet or a layer, not just individual cells like it normally does. But when there's an injury there, it'll peel off in a sheet. The ability of epithelial tissue to do that is because of these cell-cell connections that are formed that literally attach one cell to another cell. This right here could be, for instance, skin that we're looking at, and one of the characteristics of epithelial tissue is that it is non-vascular, also known as avascular. Those two words mean the same thing. And you can see this epidermis right here, which is the outer layer of skin. This epidermis is made of epithelial tissue. And if you take a look, you can see that epithelial tissue goes from here all the way to here. All of that is epithelial tissue. One of the things you don't see are blood vessels in it. And even though it's stratified epithelial tissue, meaning it's made up of many layers, it's not just one layer, you can see that there's no blood vessels in that. Down below in the dermis, yes, you've got blood vessels because this is a type of connective tissue, so it's a different kind of tissue. But epithelial does not have blood vessels. And you may be thinking, well, if it doesn't have blood, how does it survive? How does it get oxygen? Well, the gases and the nutrients that are in the blood are going to diffuse up to the epithelial tissue above. And you can probably guess that that's not going to go very well. I mean, you're going to get these bottom layers of that epithelial tissue. They're going to be oxygenated. They're going to get the nutrients. But these upper layers up here are not. Gases aren't going to be able to diffuse that far. So those upper layers of the epidermis of skin are not alive because they weren't able to get the oxygen. So only the bottom layers are actually alive in this situation. Another characteristic of epithelial tissue is that it's capable of regeneration. It undergoes what's called mitosis. And if you remember from previously when we talked about mitosis, mitosis is the when you have one cell and you get two genetically identical cells from that. So if you take a look at, for instance, skin, when when your skin dies off and your cells die off, those cells get replaced with genetically identical cells, two genetically identical cells. And the phases of mitosis, if you remember from the cell cycle, when the nucleus divides, you have your prophase, your metaphase, your anaphase, and your telophase. Do you all have any idea? Both of these cells right here are representing a stage of mitosis, and they're both representing the same stage of mitosis. Do you happen to know what stage of mitosis are represented by both of these cells? All the chromosomes are lined up along the middle of the cell. That would be metaphase. So both of these cells are showing metaphase right now, but not all cells are capable of mitosis. For example, while your epithelial tissue, there's a lot of wear and tear on epithelial tissue. You know, when you touch something, you're losing cells when that happens. When you swallow, your esophagus is lined with epithelial tissue, you're going to lose cells. So that's going to be constantly regenerating. If you ever burn the inside of your mouth when you ate a piece of pizza, you know, it was better the next day. So those cells are capable of regeneration. Not all tissue types have that ability. For instance, nervous tissue. When you damage neurons, those don't always grow back. That's why spinal cord injuries, you know, when a person's paralyzed, they don't all of a sudden get healed one day and they can walk. If they were paralyzed and unable to walk, they're going to stay that way because that does not regenerate. So not all tissue types do regenerate. If you've got heart damage, that's not going to regenerate and make you a new heart. That's not going to work either. So I'll get you, go ahead and take a look at the in-class question. You can find those in your handout, in your handbook that you got from the bookstore. So when we talked about tissue types, we said that muscle tissue was capable of conducting action potentials, and so was nervous tissue, but nervous tissue is actually making the action potentials and sending them to the muscles so the muscles can actually perform some type of movement. So you're not really going to see that with epithelial tissue. What are some general functions of epithelial tissue? It protects underlying structures. For example, the skin that you touch, when you just touch your skin, it's protecting the muscle that lies deep to that. The outer layer of the skin and epithelium of the oral cavity, for example, protect those underlying structures from abrasion as you swallow foods. It can also act as a barrier. It's part of your first line of defense. How does it do that? Skin, for example, acts as a barrier to water and reduces water loss from the body. So it also, as long as it's intact, your skin is intact, there can't be entry for pathogens into the body. So your skin protects from that as well. It does permit the passage of substances. So I know it sounds kind of contradictory there. It's like, well, it prevents this, but it allows this. It is selectively permeable. It does allow substances, for example, in the lungs. When you're looking at the alveoli, those air sacs in the lungs, it allows the passage of oxygen and carbon dioxide from one to another to allow you to be able to get that oxygen in the bloodstream and exhale out that waste, that carbon dioxide waste. It does secrete substances. We talked previously about how mucous membranes are made up of epithelial tissue, and it's going to secrete mucus. We also have sweat glands and oil glands as well that are going to secrete substances. Also, your pancreas has got some epithelial tissue in there, which is going to secrete some enzymes. Epithelial cells lining the inside of the small intestine are also going to secrete digestive enzymes to help break that food down. Cells line the respiratory tract, secreting mucus. Again, they've got those goblet cells. Epithelial tissue also has the capability of absorbing substances. For instance, your plasma membrane of certain tissues contain these proteins which regulate the absorption of materials. So obviously not all of your epithelial tissue does all of these things. So I'm giving you some examples of what epithelial tissue can do, and depending on where it's located in the body is going to kind of determine what function it's going to take on. So go ahead and get those in-class questions out, and here's the next one. It does absorb, it does secrete, and it does act as a barrier. What it does not do is contract with a force. And when we start talking about muscle tissue, you will learn that that is a function of the muscle tissue. So types of epithelial tissue. Again, you're going to be learning this in lab as well. So epithelial tissue is classified based on how many cell layers it has and the shape of those cells. So when you look at the row, what I'm showing you in each row is you've got a single layer of cells. Single means simple. And then multiple layers means stratified. We'll talk about this pseudo-stratified in a second. So a simple epithelial tissue means it's made up of one layer of cells. Stratified means it's made up of many layers of cells. Now, if we look at the columns, again, we said it was made up, our epithelial tissue names are named based on the number of layers and the shape. So if we take a look at the shape, and we kind of go down, we can see that in this first column, we're going to use the word squamous. Well, what does squamous mean? Squamous means flat. You can have a single layer, as in this first picture right here, you could have a single layer of flat-shaped cells called simple squamous, or you could have many layers of flat-shaped cells, and that would be stratified squamous. If you look at the second column, these are cube-shaped. You can see the sides and the top and the bottom are all about the same. They look like a square, okay? So these are cube-shaped. So you can have a single layer of cube-shaped cells called simple cuboidal, or you could have multiple layers of cube-shaped cells, and those would be stratified cuboidal. Then you have in your very last column here, you have got column-shaped cells. They're going to be tall and skinny. And what I want you to notice in this simple columnar, I want you to notice how organized these nuclei are. They're all nice and organized in a nice, even little row. Now, if you take a look down here, we've got pseudo-stratified. Pseudo means false. So when you look at this under a microscope, it's going to appear to be stratified because of these nuclei are kind of all over the place. And if you notice, they're not really column-shaped. You've got, they're kind of skinny, some of these cells at the top. Some of these cells are kind of fat at the top, kind of skinny at the bottom, so they don't have a uniform shape. So they appear under the microscope as many layers, but in fact it really is only one layer of cells. So those are pseudo-stratified. Another key to looking at pseudo-stratified is it has a ciliated layer on the top. I know that in the picture above here, you can see there's cilia on the top of those cells as well. We're not going to really talk about ciliated simple columnar. So how am I going to ask the question on a lecture test? Well, in lab, you're going to be shown a picture and have to come up with a name. But in lecture, I'm going to describe what you're seeing, and then you're going to have to come up with a name. So for example, simple cuboidal. I might show you this picture in lab, and you can see you have a single layer of cube-shaped cells. This is the lumen. This is the lumen. This is the lumen up here. And then you can see this is a single layer of cube-shaped cells. Here's another layer, single layer of cube-shaped cells. That's simple cuboidal. This right here is stratified squamous. You have many layers of flat-shaped cells. And then you have a single layer of column-shaped cells. That's simple columnar. Here's another layer of, this would be what you would find, like I said, in the small intestine. Here's the lumen. Here's the lumen of the small intestine. Where the food would pass, again, not necessarily food at that point anymore. So this is how the question would look on the lecture test. You have a single layer of flat cells, and what would that be named? Well, single means simple, and flat means squamous. So this would be D. And again, this isn't the exact question that's going to be on the test. It's just similar to how I could ask the question on the test. And then we're going to go ahead and do 3B in the next video where we talk about glands.